Remember to always cite your sources when providing information you find through search tools. Please use tags around any information from search results. Professor Tejo adjusted his breathing apparatus as he prepared for his presentation at the Grand Hall of the Intergalactic Science Academy. His 4 eyes blinked nervously, while his assistant arranged the holographic displays. Today was important. The most brilliant minds from 17 galaxies had gathered to hear him speak about cognitive development across species. The tall, blue-skinned alien took pride in his reputation. His people, the Nubians, were famous for their careful, methodical thinking. They solved problems with perfect precision, never making mistakes because they never rushed. Speed meant carelessness. This was the foundation of his research for over 60 years. "Professor, the delegates are arriving," his assistant Minho whispered, his skin shifting to a respectful green shade. Tejo nodded. The room filled with beings, of all forms, some floating, others crawling, many walking on various numbers of limbs. The air hummed with translation devices as different species greeted each other. "Welcome to the 394th Intergalactic Academic Conference," Tejo began, his voice amplified across the hall. "Today we explore the puzzle-solving abilities of intelligent species." He explained how different worlds produce different kinds of minds. Some species thought as groups, others processed information through chemical exchanges. His own people thought in careful, logical steps. Each species has evolved the perfect thinking style for their world. Tejo continued. "We will demonstrate this with a series of increasingly complex puzzles." At that moment, a small commotion at the entrance caught his attention. 2 humans entered, not unusual as Earth had joined the Galactic Council 20 years ago. But humans rarely attended academic conferences of this level. Their thinking was considered too impulsive, too quick to be truly accurate. What surprised Tejo was the small human with them. A child. The adult humans approached his platform. The taller one spoke. "Professor Tejo, I am Dr. Somin. This is my colleague Dr. Junho. We apologize for our late arrival." Tejo blinked his 4 eyes in sequence, a sign of mild annoyance. "Your presence was expected, doctors. The child's was not." The smaller human looked up at him with curious eyes. She showed no fear of his blue skin or extra limbs. "This is our daughter, Jiwoo," Dr. Junho explained. "Our childcare arrangements failed and the conference rules allowed family members." "This is not a place for children," Tejo said firmly. "These concepts are beyond human adults, let alone offspring." Dr. Somin smiled politely. "Actually, Professor, Jiwoo has been solving puzzles since she was very young. She might enjoy watching." Tejo made a dismissive gesture with his 3rd arm. "As you wish. Please be seated quietly." As the conference proceeded, Tejo introduced the first demonstration. A hovering platform displayed the first puzzle, a sequential pattern test that required identifying the logical next step in a complex sequence. "We will begin with something simple," he announced. "Representatives from each world will attempt to solve the puzzle while we measure their approach in time." The delegates moved to their assigned stations. The puzzle glowed before each of them, a series of shapes that transformed according to mathematical rules. Tejo noticed the human child watching with intense interest. He felt a strange mix of amusement and pity. Humans always thought they understood more than they did. "Begin," he announced. The room grew quiet, except for the soft sounds of different species thinking in their unique ways. The crystalline Valurians hummed as they processed. The gaseous floaty changed colors as they considered options. Tejo moved among them, noting their progress. The fastest solutions usually came from the hive mind species, who could process multiple approaches simultaneously. A small hand tugged at his lower robe. He looked down to see the human child, Jiwoo. "Excuse me," she said in a clear voice. "I think I know the answer." Tejo blinked slowly. "Young human? The delegates have barely begun their analysis." "But the pattern is clear," she insisted. "The shapes rotate based on their number of sides, while the colors shift according to their position in the light spectrum." Tejo stared at her. She had described the basic principle, but the actual solution required calculating through 17 more steps. And the answer? He asked, humoring her. Without hesitation, Jiwoo pointed to a specific configuration on her parents' display. This one. Taiho checked her answer against his solution key. His skin involuntarily shifted to surprised yellow. She was right. How did you solve this so quickly? He asked, his voice lower. Jiwoo shrugged. I just saw it. The pattern was obvious. The other delegates were still working. None had reached a solution yet. Impossible, Taiho muttered. Perhaps a lucky guess. But, as he looked at the small human's confident expression, something shifted in his understanding of intelligence. Perhaps there was more to discover about how different minds worked, even minds he had dismissed as inferior. Would you like to try another puzzle? He asked Jiwoo. Her eyes lit up with excitement. Yes, please. And so began the most unusual demonstration in the history of the Intergalactic Academic Conference. The conference hall buzzed with excitement after the morning break. Word had spread quickly about the human child who had solved Professor Taiho's first puzzle in record time. Many delegates were skeptical, others curious. Some of the older academics muttered about luck and coincidence. Professor Taiho had spent the break recalibrating his testing protocols. The blue-skinned alien moved with unusual quickness, his four arms working simultaneously as he adjusted the holographic puzzle displays. His skin flickered between shades of blue, a sign of deep thought among his species. Assistant Minho, prepare the beta series, Taiho instructed. Increase difficulty by 40%. Minho's eyes widened. Professor, that exceeds the planned parameters for today's demonstration. Circumstances have changed, Taiho replied simply. The delegates returned to their stations. The human child, Jiwoo, sat between her parents, swinging her legs and drinking a nutritional supplement through a straw. She seemed completely unaware of the attention she had attracted. Professor Taiho raised his primary arms for silence. Esteemed colleagues, we will now proceed to the second phase of our cognitive assessment. This series will test pattern recognition across multiple dimensions. He glanced toward Jiwoo. All participants will attempt the same challenge, no exceptions. The holographic displays flickered to life. Above each station appeared a complex, shifting geometric structure. Colors flowed through the shapes, changing according to rules that were not immediately obvious. The patterns rotated, in 3 dimensions, sometimes seeming to fold into a fourth. You have 30 minutes, Taiho announced. Begin. The conference hall grew quiet, except for the soft sounds of different species thinking. The collective mind aerials joined tentacles, forming a circle. The silicon-based Dorani extended sensory filaments into the holographic display. The gaseous floaty expanded and contracted rhythmically. Taiho moved among them, observing their methods. He lingered near the human family, watching as Jiwoo studied the shifting pattern with intense concentration. Dr. Junho leaned toward his daughter. Take your time, Jiwoo. This is much harder than the first one. Jiwoo nodded but didn't reply. Her eyes tracked the moving shapes with remarkable focus for a child her age. 10 minutes passed. None of the delegates had submitted a solution. Professor Taiho felt a small satisfaction. This puzzle typically required careful analysis of all variables. Exactly the kind of methodical thinking his people excelled at. 15 minutes. The Dorani representative signaled completion. Taiho hurried over and checked the solution. Incorrect, he announced. Continue. 20 minutes. 3 more species had submitted solutions. All were wrong. Taiho noticed growing frustration among the delegates. Even the hive mind aerials seemed to be struggling, their tentacles twitching in confusion. Professor, a small voice called. Taiho turned to see Jiwoo raising her hand. His 4 eyes blinked in sequence. Yes, young human. I think I have the answer. A ripple of surprise moved through the room. Several delegates stopped working to watch. Taiho approached the human station. Show me. Jiwoo's small fingers moved through the holographic display, manipulating the pattern with surprising confidence. She adjusted 3 intersection points, rotated a central element, and then made a final connection that Taiho hadn't expected. The pattern locked into place and glowed green. The universal signal for a correct solution. 22 minutes. A new record. Taiho checked and rechecked the solution. It was perfect, but she had used an approach he'd never seen before. "Explain your method," he demanded, his skin shifting to an intense blue. Jiwoo looked up at him, her expression calm. "The pattern isn't really about the shapes. It's about the spaces between them. If you look at the gaps instead of the solids, the rule becomes clear." Taiho stared at her. In 400 years of using this puzzle, no one had ever described it that way. Yet she was absolutely right. The solution emerged from negative space, something his species, with their focus on concrete elements, rarely considered. The other delegates abandoned their work, moving closer to observe. Murmurs filled the room. "A lucky insight," said the Durrani representative, crystal skin glinting skeptically. "Test her again," suggested an aerial, tentacles waving. Professor Taiho's skin shifted to resolute purple. "We shall proceed directly to the Gamma series," Minho gasped. "Professor, the Gamma series is designed for advanced cognitive specialists. It has never been used in a public demonstration." "Today we make an exception," Taiho replied. He turned to face the crowd. "A brief recess while we prepare the next challenge." As the delegates moved away, Taiho approached Jiwoo's parents. "Your offspring's performance is unexpected." Dr. Soman smiled. "Jiwoo has always seen patterns differently. We noticed when she was very young." "How did your species develop this ability?" Taiho asked, genuine curiosity in his voice. Dr. Junho shrugged. "Humans evolved as hunters and gatherers. Quick pattern recognition meant survival, spotting predators, finding food, reading weather changes." Taiho considered this. His own species had evolved as careful builders, where one mistake could mean structural collapse. Their cognitive evolution had followed accordingly, methodical, sequential, perfect, but slow. "The final challenge will begin in 10 minutes, he announced, moving away. For the first time in his long academic career, Professor Taiho felt something unusual, uncertainty about what would happen next. How could a human child see solutions that eluded the greatest minds of 17 galaxies? He intended to find out. The conference hall fell silent as Professor Taiho activated the Gamma series puzzle. The holographic display was unlike anything the delegates had seen before. Colors shifted across complex geometric forms that seemed to break the rules of normal space. Shapes folded into themselves, creating patterns that moved between dimensions. "This challenge," Taiho explained, his 4 eyes blinking solemnly, "was created by the Grand Mathematical Council of Nubia. Only 12 beings have ever solved it correctly." The delegates looked nervous. Several representatives from less mathematically advanced worlds quietly excused themselves. Even the hive-mind Ariels seemed hesitant, their tentacles drawing closer together in what appeared to be anxiety. Jiwoo sat perfectly still, her eyes wide as she studied the shifting patterns. Her parents exchanged worried glances. "Professor?" Dr. Soman said quietly. "Perhaps this is too advanced for—" "Let her try," Taiho interrupted. "I must understand how her mind works." The remaining delegates took their positions. The room hummed with tension as the challenge began. The puzzle was not just difficult, it was designed to be nearly impossible. It required understanding mathematical principles that most species took centuries to develop. Taiho moved around the room, watching each participant struggle. The Durrani representative had extended all 12 sensory filaments, but seemed confused by the data. The gaseous floaty had gone completely still, a sign of deep concentration. The aerial collective had separated into individual members, each examining a different aspect of the puzzle. 20 minutes passed. No one had made significant progress. Taiho felt a familiar satisfaction. This puzzle separated true mathematical geniuses from merely intelligent beings. He glanced toward Jiwoo, expecting to see frustration or confusion on her face. Instead, he saw intense focus. Jiwoo wasn't just looking at the puzzle, she was moving with it. Her hands traced patterns in the air, following invisible lines between the shifting forms. Sometimes she closed her eyes, as if seeing something beyond the visual display. Interesting, Taiho muttered, moving closer to observe. After 37 minutes, something unexpected happened. Jiwoo stopped moving. She sat very still, staring at a specific point in the holographic display that seemed empty to Taiho. Then she smiled. "I see it now," she said softly. "See what?" Taiho asked, his skin shifting to curious yellow. "The hidden pattern." Jiwoo pointed to what looked like empty space. "It's not in the shapes. It's in how they move around this center point." Taiho blinked all four eyes simultaneously, a rare sign of surprise among his people. "That's not possible. You cannot see the central void without solving the outer equations first." "But it's right there," Jiwoo insisted. "Look." She reached into the holographic display and touched what appeared to be nothing. Suddenly, the entire puzzle shifted perspective. The shapes realigned themselves around the point she had identified. New connections formed, new patterns emerged. The display flashed green. Solved. The room erupted in chaos. Delegates abandoned their stations to gather around the human child. Questions came from all directions in dozens of languages, overwhelming the translation systems. Impossible. How did she see the void point? The human must have prior knowledge. Professor Taiho raised all four arms for silence. His skin had turned bright white, the Nubian color of scientific breakthrough. "Young human," he said when the room quieted. "Explain how you found the solution." Jiwoo looked confused by the question. "I just looked for the quiet place." "The quiet place?" "Yes. In complex patterns, there's always a quiet place where everything balances. If you find that first, the rest makes sense." Dr. Junho stepped forward. "Professor, humans often use intuitive leaps in problem solving. We call it seeing the forest for the trees. Sometimes understanding the whole pattern gives insight that examining individual elements cannot." Taiho's scientific mind rebelled against this concept. His species approached problems methodically, step by step. The idea of jumping directly to a solution without following the proper sequence seemed like cheating, and yet the solution was correct. "But the mathematical principles," he began. "I didn't use math," Jiwoo interrupted. "I used this." She tapped her head. "Remarkable," whispered Minho, who had been silent until now. "The human child has developed an entirely different cognitive pathway." Professor Taiho felt something he had not experienced in 200 years, the excitement of discovering something truly new. His research had always confirmed what he already believed, that methodical thinking was superior. Now he faced evidence that challenged his most basic assumptions. "This changes everything," he said quietly. "An entirely different form of intelligence." He turned to address the stunned delegates. "We must rethink our understanding of cognitive development. What we are witnessing may represent an evolutionary path none of us considered." Dr. Soman put her arm around Jiwoo. "She's still just a child, Professor. This is simply how she sees the world." "No," Taiho said, his voice filled with new respect. "It is not simple at all." He made a formal gesture of academic recognition to Jiwoo, the first time in recorded history that a Nubian professor had acknowledged a human as an intellectual equal. "Young human," he said, "would you be willing to help me understand how your mind works?" Jiwoo nodded. "I can try, but it's hard to explain. It's like asking someone how they breathe." "Then perhaps," Taiho suggested, his scientific curiosity fully awakened, "we should create a new puzzle together. One that will show others what you see." The other delegates watched in amazement as the proud Nubian professor bent down to eye level with the human child. In that moment, two vastly different kinds of intelligence reached toward understanding. I'll write part 4, the final test as a short 800-word story in third person, using simple and basic English without headings. The Bardet sun rose over the green hills as Sarah walked toward the old school building. Today was her final test. After 3 long years of study, this one day would decide her future. "You can do this," she whispered to herself. Her hands shook a little as she gripped her bag tighter. Inside the building, 20 other students waited. Some looked calm, others nervous, like Sarah. Professor Chen stood at the front of the room with a stack of papers. "Welcome to your final test," he said. "This test will show if you are ready to become healers." Sarah sat at her desk and took deep breaths. When the test papers reached her, she stared at the first question. It asked about plants that could cure fever. "I know this," she thought, and began to write. Hours passed. Sarah's hand hurt from writing, but she kept going. Some questions were easy, others made her think hard. She remembered her grandmother's lessons about healing herbs from the forest. Those memories helped her answer the hardest questions. As Sarah finished the last question, Professor Chen announced, "Time is up." Sarah handed in her test and walked outside. The fresh air felt good after being inside for so long. Other students talked about the test, but Sarah wanted to be alone. She walked to a small lake near the school. Sitting under a tree, she wondered if she had done enough to pass. "Mind if I join you?" a voice asked. Sarah looked up to see Lin, a quiet boy from her class. She nodded, and he sat beside her. "How do you think you did?" Lin asked. "I'm not sure," Sarah said. Some questions were hard. They sat quietly for a while, watching the water. "My family expects me to become a healer," Lin said. "They've been healers for 5 generations." Sarah nodded. "My grandmother was the healer in our village. She taught me about plants before she died. I want to make her proud." The next day, all students gathered in the main hall. Professor Chen stood with a list in his hands. "When I call your name, please come forward," he said. Sarah's heart beat, fast as name after name was called. Some students smiled when they heard the results, others looked sad. "Lin Wei," Professor Chen called. Lin walked to the front. Professor Chen smiled and handed him a small green badge. Lin had passed. More names were called. Sarah waited, her hands now cold with worry. "Sarah Mendez," Professor Chen finally said. Sarah walked forward on shaky legs. The room seemed too quiet. Professor Chen looked at her paper for what felt like forever. Then he reached into a box beside him. "Sarah Mendez, you have shown great knowledge of healing arts," he said. "But more importantly, you showed wisdom in your answers. You didn't just write what you learned from books. You showed that you understand healing comes from both knowledge and heart." He handed her not just a green badge, but also a small silver pin shaped like a leaf. "This special honor is for the student who best understands the true meaning of healing," he said. "Congratulations." Sarah couldn't speak. She took the badge and pin with shaking hands. Later, as students celebrated outside, Lin found Sarah again. "Congratulations." "On the silver leaf," he said. "You deserved it." Sarah smiled. "Thanks, and congratulations to you too." "What will you do now?" Lin asked. "Go back to my village," Sarah said. "They need a healer since my grandmother died." Lin nodded. "I'll be working in the city hospital." As the sun began to set, Sarah looked at her silver pin shining in the light. She thought of her grandmother and smiled. Tomorrow would bring new challenges as a healer, but today she would celebrate passing her final test. The journey that had started 3 years ago had ended, but a new one was about to begin. Sarah was ready. I'll write Part 5, A New Understanding. As a short 800-word story in third person, using simple and basic English without headings, the village looked just as Sarah remembered. Small houses lined the dirt road, smoke rising from chimneys. Children played in the square while adults worked in fields nearby. After 6 months as the village healer, Sarah felt at home again. She walked through her small garden behind the healing house, picking herbs for the day's work. The morning sun warmed her face as she filled her basket with mint leaves and yellow flowers. "Healer Sarah," a voice called. Sarah turned to see Mrs. Liu running toward her. "Please come quickly. My son fell from a tree. His arm looks wrong." Sarah grabbed her medicine bag and followed Mrs. Liu to her home. Inside, 10-year-old Jun sat crying, holding his arm. Sarah could see it was broken. "I'll help you," Sarah said softly. She gave June some tea to ease the pain, then carefully felt his arm. "We need to set the bone." June looked scared. "Will it hurt?" "Yes," Sarah answered honestly. "But I'll be quick, and then the pain will get better." She remembered Professor Chen's words, "Healers must be honest with their patients." After setting Jun's arm and wrapping it, Sarah left medicine for the pain. "Rest now," she told him. "I'll come back tomorrow." As Sarah walked home, she saw a group of people gathered near the village entrance. A fancy carriage had arrived, something rare in their small village. "Who is it?" Sarah asked old Mr. Wang, who stood watching. "City doctor," Mr. Wang said. "Says he's here to open a new healing center. Has new medicines from the capital." Sarah felt a strange twist in her stomach. A city doctor? Here? The next day, Sarah saw a sign on the largest building in the village, Modern Healing Center, Dr. Zhang Wei. People lined up outside, curious about the new doctor. Over the next weeks, fewer people came to Sarah for help. Dr. Zhang had shiny tools and colorful medicines in glass bottles. Sarah had herbs and simple remedies. One rainy evening, Sarah sat alone, in her healing house, feeling useless. A knock at the door surprised her. "Lynn?" Sarah couldn't believe her eyes. Her classmate from school stood dripping wet on her doorstep. "Hello, Sarah," Lynn smiled. "I heard this village now has 2 healers." "Not for long," Sarah sighed, inviting him in. "Everyone prefers Dr. Zhang's new medicines." Lynn sat by the fire. "The hospital sent me to learn from Dr. Zhang. They say his family discovered new healing methods." Sarah felt even worse. Even Lynn thought Dr. Zhang was better. The next morning, a loud knock woke Sarah. Mrs. Liu stood there looking worried. "Jun's arm is hot and has strange lines on it," she said. "Dr. Zhang gave him medicine, but Jun got worse." Sarah hurried to see. Jun. His arm had red lines spreading from under the bandage. Infection. The new medicine wasn't working. "I need to clean the wound and use a different treatment," Sarah said. Sarah worked quickly, cleaning Jun's arm and applying a paste made from special moss and honey. "This draws out infection," she explained to Mrs. Liu. 2 days later, Jun's fever broke. The red lines faded. Sarah visited daily, changing the bandage and checking his progress. One afternoon, Sarah found someone else in Jun's room, Dr. Zhang himself. "Your treatment worked," he said, looking at Jun's healing arm. "My medicine failed." Sarah didn't know what to say. "I have the newest medicines from the capital," Dr. Zhang continued, "but I don't know the local plants. The hospital sent Lynn to learn from me, but I think I need to learn from you." Sarah was surprised. "Learn from me?" "Modern medicine is valuable," Dr. Zhang explained, "but so is traditional knowledge. Perhaps we could work together, share what we know." The next day, Lynn and Dr. Zhang visited Sarah's healing house. She showed them her herb garden and explained each plant's purpose. "This red flower reduces fever," she said, "and this bark helps with stomach pain." Dr. Zhang showed Sarah his medicines and tools. "This helps measure fever precisely," he explained, "and this can see tiny harmful things in blood." Over dinner, Lynn smiled at Sarah. "Remember the final test? Professor Chen said true healing comes from both knowledge and heart." Sarah nodded. "And from working together, it seems." As weeks passed, Sarah and Dr. Zhang created new treatments combining their methods. Villagers now visited both healers, sometimes together in the same building. Sarah realized that healing wasn't about old versus new, but finding the best way to help people. This new understanding made her a better healer than she ever imagined possible.